Hello and welcome to this video on some of the most common and significant misconceptions and myths around bonsai. Some of these are simple but prevalent. Others are just ignorance. Some yet again are very niche, but perhaps the most damaging. This situation is not surprising. Bonsai is seen as somewhat obscure, weird and esoteric. With the aura of otherness, bonsai often get mistaken for something other than what they are. Tiny trees in pots. As it is a rather small hobby, many people have no reason to think any more of it. In fact, they may really only know about bonsai from watching Karate Kid. That is no basis on which to build an understanding of an entire hobby. No one thinks they understand the intricacies of ice hockey after watching the Mighty Ducks. With that, let's start with the first and most common misconception. No, bonsai are not starved of nutrients by root pruning. It is in fact the very opposite. Root pruning is so you can pack as much nutrition into the soil as you can while keeping the bonsai alive. Prune too much and the tree will die. Prune too little and you'll need to repot the bonsai that much sooner and increase the risk of a dead bonsai. By pruning the roots, you give more time for the bonsai to grow in its pot. This leads to huge growth in some species each year, not retardation of growth. And this neatly intersects with the second myth. You do not keep the tree small by not watering it. Doing this will just kill your bonsai like any other plant that is not a succulent or a cacti. Bonsai need water, and not doing so leads to death. Simple. Bonsai get watered daily in many cases, and in summer it may be several times a day. The soil is made specifically to retain just enough moisture for the bonsai, but also to facilitate enough drainage to prevent root rot. Taking these two prior points, we can come to a simple conclusion. Bonsai grow just like regular trees. They are not trees that stop growing or just grow slowly because they are deprived of nutrition. Bonsai will grow voraciously when the circumstances and time of year are right. It is like a plant in your garden. By giving it everything it needs to grow well, it will do so. When deprived, it will wane, dwindle, and then die. This is why bonsai are pruned. It keeps that growth in check. They do not stop growing and if trained right, should grow better. The problems so far are one side of the equation. The opposite is when people kill their bonsai with kindness. They think the small tree in its small pot does not get or hold enough water. To keep their new bonsai alive and healthy, they water it. Then they water it again, and again, and maybe even yet again to be sure. This leads to the bonsai becoming waterlogged. The roots rot, and now you have a nice twig in a decorative pot, even if you and the tree do not know it yet. Less prevalent is the misconception that bonsai are all, or at least predominantly, old, if not very old, trees, shrubs, and bushes. Arguably, that is the idea behind many bonsai choices, the illusion and perception of age. The truth is many, and in fact the vast majority of bonsai are at most decades old, not centuries. Some may only be a few years old. There are of course some very famous examples of very old trees. These can be a century and even older again. These famous trees are the exception, not the rule. Something that plays into the myth of all bonsai being old, or at least the age myth in general, is that you need to make them appear old, and part of that process is wire. It's thought by some people that wire is what prevents a tree from growing big, and therefore you can have an old tree that is very small. Wire will not prevent growth, and this is why the common myth is just that. Another is that wire is used to keep the tree small. Neither of these are true. Pruning will keep the tree small and wire will keep it styled. Wire is used to create the style, and this can accentuate the appearance of old age, but it will not stop that growth. The exception to this point is if you fail to remove wire. In that case, it will stop the tree branch from growing, as it will kill the branch or trunk. This is because the wire acts as a tourniquet and stops the flow of sap. This starves the branch or trunk beyond the wire of nutrition or waste removal. This is just like frostbite, gangrene, heart infarction, and similar lack of blood supply problems in the human body. It will stop growth, but it will also lead to death, so not ideal. All of this means the tree is going to largely survive as a normal tree, but stylized. This is the fundamental meaning of bonsai. A tree in a pot, but with style. Bonsai trees will, as a consequence of this, produce fruit and flowers. For the most part, all of this is relative to the normal, full-size counterparts in nature, not necessarily the counterparts used in an orchard or otherwise sold through a nursery. These have been developed over years, possibly decades if not centuries, to have much larger products in the form of floral and fruit results. Natural, widely occurring variants have much smaller fruit, and this is what you will see in relative size with your bonsai. They will still be full-sized fruit for the wild version, not what you would find from a fruit tree grown in a nursery or orchard. This will normally mean that the fruit is smaller, while the flowers may be larger. This will be supported to some extent by keeping the bonsai going well with fertilizer. The lack of fertilizer, which is another myth, will not detract from its growth, as the bonsai will still grow. What will happen is that the bonsai will not grow as well or may become sickly. It is similar to how a human can live with all of the nutrients that they would need. What happens is that they grow in an unhealthy manner. It could be anemia from a lack of vitamin D, weak bones from a lack of calcium or sunlight, regular illnesses or infection from a lack of leukocytes, and so on. A bonsai will see something similar. The leaves will not grow correctly, a lack of chlorophyll may occur, the tree may be prone to illness, and so on. Fertilizer is to a large extent needed to counteract this. It supports the tree's growth and health. Mind you, it can also swing the other way. Too much fertilizer can kill the bonsai by damaging the roots. If you support a young, relatively new bonsai, you can get a great deal of growth and development in relatively short order, and fertilizer is needed for that. This is a good thing, as bonsai are often described as being very expensive. In general terms, this is not true. There are, of course, bonsai plants which are incredibly expensive. This is a result of them being famous, incredibly old, very well developed and stylized. The more advanced a bonsai specimen is, the more time, resources and investment have gone from the person who has been working on it. That means that there are also far less developed and far less worked bonsai. These are the trees that are not going to be anywhere near as expensive and can be considerably cheaper. This can be something as simple as a plant bought from a nursery that is intended to be a regular garden plant that you are instead going to style as a bonsai. Finally, we have the idea that bonsai are indoor plants. No. Just no. While you may only see bonsai at an exhibition, this is a short period of indoor display preceded and followed by an extended period of being outdoors in the full sun and weather. As with most plants and just about all trees and shrubs, they need to be outside to grow and live. There are some very specific exceptions to this, and they need to be handled with very specific needs and concerns because they can be grown indoors. the overarching rule remains that a bonsai will survive best, grow best, and be most healthy if kept outdoors when not being displayed, and should only be displayed indoors for short periods. As you can see, most of the myths and misconceptions around bonsai are based on misunderstandings and ignorance. In other cases, it can be a result of good intentions that end badly. There are, of course, some very rare, high-profile, or unusual exceptions to some of these myths, and they are exactly that. Exceptions that should not be used as a general guide on what should and shouldn't be done with bonsai. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions you have below,